Missing person cases are filled with twists and turns, and investigators go to great lengths to solve these cases and help provide the family with answers. But sometimes it appears as if some people mysteriously vanish into thin air, leaving behind no clues or evidence as to what could have happened to them. Number 5. The case of Owen Parfitt is truly one of the strangest missing person cases in history, and his case takes us back to the 1760s, a time when forensic investigation techniques were a far cry from what they are today, and record-keeping was merely an afterthought. Sources are unable to agree on whether Owen's mysterious disappearance took place in 1763 or 1768, and due to a lack of proper historical records, it's unlikely that we will ever know the truth. By the 1760s, Parfitt was in his 60s, and his years of being a rambunctious youngster had finally caught up with him, added with the fact that he had spent the last few decades doing back-breaking work. As a result of his wild lifestyle, Parfitt was severely disabled, and some sources even describe him as being virtually a cripple. As a result, Parfitt had to surrender his independence and was forced to move in with his sister, who lived in Shepton Mallet, England. Once a fun-loving spirit, Parfitt found the adjustment hard. However, he took it in stride and made the best of a bad situation. On the evening in question, whether that was in June of 63 or 68, we don't know, but Parfitt was sitting on a chair on the front porch of the house. As Parfitt was disabled and unable to move, he required the assistance of both his sister and a neighbor to be carried outside onto the chair. This is a detail that becomes important later on, and makes his disappearance all the more bizarre. According to his sister, one moment he was sitting on the chair on the front porch, taking in the warm evening air. Not wanting to disturb him, she went into the house and finished up the housework. However, she noticed that a storm was rolling in, and went outside to bring him inside. However, when she reached the front porch, there was no sign of Owen. He had simply vanished into thin air within a matter of minutes. There were other people in the area at the time, and they didn't report seeing or hearing anything out of the ordinary. The local community rallied behind Owen's sister and went to great lengths to try to find him. After all, how far could he have gotten if he was unable to walk? The case takes a bizarre twist when, after hours and even days of searching, no sign of Owen was ever found. Everyone was baffled as to how he could have gotten up and just vanished. This gave way to strange theories such as pirates had taken him, or that the devil himself had come up from the fiery pits of hell to take him away. Despite numerous searches, no sign of Owen Parfitt has ever been found. There was a glimmer of hope in 1813 when skeletal remains were recovered in Shepton Mallet. However, it was later determined that these remains belonged to a woman. For centuries, people in the area and across southwest England have continued to search for Owen, but no new evidence has ever been recovered. Number 4. The mysterious case of a prisoner known only as Di Derisi is one of the most bizarre and baffling missing persons cases to ever occur in human history. There are very few details that are known about Di Derisi, but the details about his disappearance are chilling and have left many investigators baffled for centuries. According to historical sources, he was a personal aide to Captain Fritz Alswanger, a respected knight in the Prussian army in the late 1700s. The captain was a man of great wealth and great social standing, and after he passed away, Di Derisi assumed his identity and began living a life he had always dreamed of. He was able to keep up the charade for a while. However, others began to notice that something wasn't quite right. Di Derisi was caught red-handed after he'd withdrawn money from the captain's bank account while wearing a wig. For his crimes, he was sentenced to prison and ordered to serve at least 10 years. The offense of impersonating an army captain was quite the scandal and outraged the public. Other details about Diderisi are sparse. That is, until his mysterious disappearance in 1815 from prison. One day, while out in the prison yard for his daily exercise, Diderisi began to slowly fade away in a mysterious fog. Prisoners and guards alike scrambled, trying to make sense of what was unfolding before their eyes. But by the time they could react, Diderisi had literally disappeared into thin air. Prisoners recalled that his shackles mysteriously fell to the ground and became devoid of the human figure that once held them around their wrists and ankles. There have been many theories over the years, and many historians have tried to piece together what really happened to Diderisi. One historian was able to find out that a man by that name had been reported missing from prison in 1812 and 1813, and that staff had just assumed that he had escaped. The exact details of his disappearance still remain shrouded in mystery, and many have speculated that the paranormal mysteries were added to embellish the story and make it more exciting. One thing is for certain, however, there was a prisoner named Diderisi at this prison who disappeared into thin air, never to be seen again. Number 3. The details in Shannon Michelle Hokanson's disappearance are few and far between, and her case has not received the wide-scale media attention that some missing person cases garner. However, it's important to highlight these cases and use this platform to help reunite these people with their families. Shannon Michelle Hokanson, also sometimes listed as Shannon Baldwin Hokanson, was last heard from on May 27, 2012, when she made contact with her family via phone. Despite not being able to contact their loved one for months, her family did not officially report her missing until August 7, 2012, and an investigation was quickly launched. Investigators learned that Shannon was last seen with Mark McVickers and Eric Herrera, and that McVickers had been in possession of Shannon's car at the time of her disappearance. Shannon had a history of drug use, however, and had recently made attempts to get herself clean and began working on rebuilding a relationship with her 3 children who lived with other family members. Shannon is just one of thousands of people who have gone missing from Oklahoma in the last few years, but detectives say that her case haunts them the most. Detective Ramsey of the Enid Police Department said, quote, "It's something I think about every day, and every day when I'm at work, I work on it. I'm very hopeful that someone will call me one day or come to the station and say that they know where she is." After posting missing persons posters, one potential witness came forward, claiming that McVickers, the man who Shannon had been with at the time of her disappearance, claimed to have been responsible, telling her that, quote, "they had dumped her body on the other side of the Texas border in a body of water." Despite extensive searches and numerous interviews, nothing has ever come of this lead, and investigators are desperate to give Shannon's family answers. Shannon may use the names of Shannon Robinson, Shannon Baldwin, or Shannon Baldwin Hokanson, and is described as a white female between 5 feet and 5 feet 3, with brown hair and brown eyes. She was last heard from on May 27, 2012. She has numerous tattoos, including a frog with a mushroom on the outside of her ankle, blue roses on her lower back, an orange flower on the top of her left foot, a butterfly on her right shoulder, a heart that sits between her thumb and index finger, and flames running down her back that remain unfinished. According to Shannon's Doe Network profile, she also has breast implants and a scar on her abdomen. Dentals and fingerprints are available for comparison, and DNA is underway. If you have any information about the disappearance of 29-year-old Shannon Michelle Hokanson, you're asked to contact the Enid Police Department at 580-616-7119, quoting case number 2012-10118. Number 2. The case of Barbara Bollick is just one of the thousands of cases of people who go missing in the woods and national forests of the USA, and author David Paulides has even coined a name for this bizarre phenomenon: Missing 411. Paulides believes that there is something otherworldly or supernatural at play in America's national parks, and his books cover cases such as Barbara's in detail to help highlight the epidemic of people who mysteriously vanish from national parks and forests. 55-year-old Barbara Bollock was last seen on July 18, 2007, near the Bear Creek Overlook in the Bitterroot Mountains in Montana. On the day that she went missing, Barbara was hiking with a friend, and the two were headed towards the Bear Creek Overlook as previously mentioned. According to this friend, who has not been publicly named, the pair stopped to take a look at a spectacular view in front of them, and the friend placed the time anywhere between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. The friend told investigators that Barbara was just feet in front of them while they stopped to take in the view. When the friend turned back around, Barbara had mysteriously vanished without so much as making a sound or leaving a trace. At first, the friend believed Barbara had set off further down the trail without them. However, after searching for her, they knew that something was very wrong. Investigators were called to the scene, and the friend told them that Barbara had been carrying a pistol with her at the time, and that she was very familiar with the overlook and the mountainous area. When Barbara's husband was informed that she had disappeared, he reiterated that she was a keen hiker and was unlikely to have wandered too close to the edge of the overlook, as she was terrified of heights. He also confirmed that he believed she had no reason to voluntarily disappear, as she left behind her pets and also all of her ID documents, something that she would have needed had she wanted to start a new life somewhere else. The Ravalli Sheriff's Office has confirmed that the friend who was with Barbara on July 18th is not considered a suspect or a person of interest. However, they do have two hikers that they would like to speak to in regards to Barbara's disappearance. The two hikers were seen in the area walking their dogs during the time that Barbara went missing. Police have not revealed why they wish to speak with these two. Both men were in their early 20s in 2007, with the first man being described as dark-skinned with black hair, and the second man being described as medium-skinned with red hair. Ravalli County Sheriff's officers have also revealed that they believe the two men may have been traveling in a light-colored Chevrolet S10 with Montana license plates. Barbara Bollock is described as a white female with red hair and brown eyes. She's 5 feet tall and 115 pounds, and is known to wear glasses and has both of her ears pierced. She was last seen wearing a pastel-colored t-shirt and tan shorts. And if you have any information, you're asked to contact the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office at 406-375-4005. Number 1. James Tetford was a war hero and celebrated veteran in his local community of Bennington, Vermont. However, Tetford's name made international news for very different reasons in 1949, when he mysteriously vanished and became a part of the phenomenon known as the Bennington Triangle. Tetford certainly wouldn't be the first or last person to disappear under mysterious circumstances from Bennington, Vermont, but the details of his case will leave you baffled. On December 1st, 1949, James Tetford boarded a bus from St. Albans, Vermont to Bennington, Vermont after visiting with his family. At the time, Tetford was living in a veteran's retirement home in Bennington, Vermont after he had returned from the war. Tetford was married, however, in the years before his move leading him to the retirement home, his wife, Pearl, disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Historical sources tell us that Tetford returned home one day to find Pearl was gone. There was no note waiting for him on the table, and he simply never heard from her again. Tetford was crushed by his wife's sudden disappearance, and unable to cope with running the home by himself, along with his loss, he moved into a veteran's retirement home, where he could receive the care and support that he needed. On December 1st, 1949, Tetford boarded the bus that took him along Route 7 and home to Bennington. The journey would take about 8 hours as they passed through the Green Mountain area and gave Tedford time to think and relax. On the day of his journey, there was heavy snowfall, resulting in a much slower journey, much to the other 14 passengers' dismay. Despite the setback, everyone stayed in their seats and tried to entertain themselves the best they could, and hoped that the time would pass quickly. All of the passengers on board and the driver testified that they saw James Tedford asleep in his seat for the entire journey, including at the stop before Bennington where the service terminated. As the bus pulled into its final destination, the passengers made their way off of the bus one by one. However, it was quickly noted that the elderly man who had been asleep was now nowhere to be seen. No one on the bus had seen Tedford leave, and even more bizarrely was the fact that all of his luggage was still neatly placed into the luggage racks. An open bus timetable was found on his seat, but there was no sign of Tedford. How he had managed to seemingly vanish into thin air without any of the other passengers noticing, and why he'd left behind all of his luggage remains unknown. To this day, these questions remain unanswered, and the case of James Tedford and the Bennington Triangle may never be resolved. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.